Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Today, once again, we are going to talk about what is happening in Afghanistan. There have been many developments, viewers, and it is important to remember what they are, because on one side we saw that women have started appearing in professional capacity on Afghan channels. That is happening at a time when Afghan Taliban are totally in control in Afghanistan. The second thing is the US President last night, at least as per Pakistan's time, last night spoke to media, actually addressed the nation, and in that he defended his position, his decision vociferously, although the questions about the pullout or withdrawal and the way it went on were not that much discussed, but it was very important development. The Afghan delegation that we actually mentioned yesterday as well, comprising non-Pashtun Afghan leaders, they are still in Islamabad. They interacted with the Prime Minister and the leadership of Pakistan as well. And then there is the issue of women. In addition to women, then Zabiullah Mujahid, the official spokesman of the Afghan Taliban, shortly, a bit earlier, spoke to the media for the first time from Kabul. These are very important statements that he actually made. Let us read them. Let us know what exactly was he saying. These cards are important. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid says everyone is forgiven, and then everyone should forgive them as well, the Taliban as well. Right? The second one is we will not be allowing Afghan soil to be used against anybody. Zabiullah Mujahid again. Women are allowed to educate according to Sharia. And this was actually, then he qualified also within the confines of Sharia, that they can go to the universities and everywhere. We are guaranteeing women all rights within the limits of Islam, Taliban spokesperson. And fourth one is, I reassure all media groups, if they work according to Islamic law, they are free to work. And then he also said that they are free to criticize the government, whatever government is made as well, including Taliban. So these are important statements. Let me introduce the guest I've got in the studio and on Skype as well. In the studio, okay, right. In the studio, I have with me Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Janjua, who is acting president of Islamabad Policy Research Institute. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Javed Jadoon Saab is a senior analyst, senior journalist. He also joins us. Very kind of you, sir, to join us. Anwar Iqbal, I was told, a senior journalist, will be joining us from DC, Washington, DC. The moment he does, we are going to, I'm going to formally thank him as well. Before we start, there is, a package of Vox Pops, the opinion of Pakistani people regarding Taliban's takeover. Let us watch that, and then we are going to move forward.
In my opinion, it's very unfortunate that US has spent around $2.2 trillion in the last 2 decades, and it's still they're not able to empower the government of Afghanis, and Taliban's have took over. I don't know what's going to happen, but for Pakistan, it's really important now for this region as well as Pakistan as a country, that what are our foreign policies in terms of connections, connectivity, and empowerment with Afghanistan, because it's going to get really critical now. So high hopes with this government.
My current opinion on the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan is basically, we as Pakistanis, we shouldn't get involved in such crisis. Obviously, we all have some opinion on the ongoing crisis, but we're already facing so much issues in Pakistan. So we should take a step back, because obviously refugees are going to come to Pakistan. So as a Pakistani, I think we should just pray for them and for the people who are living there. That's it.
My opinion about the entire situation of Afghanistan is that it's dreadful, it's heart-wrenching, and all the nations, especially Islamic nations, should unite and, you know, make a change, help them, because so many people have been working so hard all their lives, and everything is diminishing within seconds. You know, all the women are supposed to hide their education certificates, whatever they've achieved, it's worth nothing now. So I would, you know, ask everyone, all the Islamic countries, to play a part. Either it can be through social media, either it can be through donations, you know, just to make a difference, because every person, every donation, or, you know, every tweet these days counts. So I just hope that all of this resolves really quickly, and, you know, and all our Afghani brothers and sisters, that they can come at peace.
My opinion on the current matter on Afghanistan would be the Afghanis have a right to self-determination, whether it's Taliban or any other faction. They have a right to political future of Afghanistan. And as a Pakistani, I'm happy about the situation that at least there was no lives lost in the change of government.
I have a feeling that Taliban is a changed sort of people. They are not what they were earlier. How it all translates for Pakistan, that remains to be seen.
My personal opinion on the Afghan situation is that we're a bordering country, and so ultimately we should be supporting them. And since the past 40 years, they have been fighting for autonomy and their democratic rights, and they have succeeded.
As the international community carefully watches the great new game that is unfolding in Afghanistan, we asked ordinary Pakistanis their opinion on the US withdrawal and the current situation in Afghanistan. This is Maham Noor reporting from PTV World.
Right, you have... Right, you have listened to Pakistan's people. It is important to remember, because somehow Indian propaganda machine keeps on telling you that there are people who are dancing on the streets or something like that. But if you have listened to what was said, it will show you how mature Pakistani's opinion is. Now let me come to the studio and let me start asking questions. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much once again for joining us. What happens now? We have seen Taliban actually speaking to the media, but simultaneously they also reminded us that there is no government in Afghanistan as yet, and they are working for an inclusive government. How inclusive do you think that government will be?
I think we all heard Zabiullah Mujahid, and he was very explicit in saying that arrangement for a new government would be soon in place. How inclusive it would be, it would all depend on the give and take that Taliban are ready to concede, and what others are expected to, agree to. We know there's a lot that has changed in Taliban also, and they have shown a lot of media savvy, and compared to their earlier, reincarnation, they are a different entity. Last time they pulled out Najibullah from the UN compound to hang him. This time around they are sitting, answering questions from the lady correspondent. The first question that conceded was from Al Jazeera lady correspondent. So this shows that there is a lot of flexibility in them. The government that is going to be formed would be, interesting affair to see as to how they include all the other stakeholders. If their statements are anything to go by, they have been very clear and explicit in stating that anybody who is willing to take part in Afghanistan's rebuilding and progress would be welcome. This was the statement of
You said there will be some give and take. What does the other side now have to offer? What can they give? Because we understand that the Afghan Taliban right now control most of the country. So what exactly will be on offer from the other side?
On offer from the other side, by you mean?
You said inclusive. There is going to be give and take. If you are going to include people from minorities, women, others, what can they offer?
You see, what we need to understand that this is going to be an interim government, and interim government is always a step towards ultimate objective, that is framing a constitution for the long-term system that Afghans want to establish. Maybe they want to establish the old traditional way of loya jirga, maybe they go for an electoral route, but jury is still out on that. Give and take by mean, they would give every ethnicity its share commensurate to its percentage in the population.
Right.
So I think that would be a fair deal to my
women are 50% of the population, right? But let me bring in Javed Jadoon sir. Your take on what kind of government are we going to see in the coming days?
Thank you very much, Farrukh. I think it is quite clear that Taliban are in complete control of Afghanistan. They haven't come into Kabul because of any political arrangement. They have come into Kabul because of their military prowess and their control of every major city. And when all major cities had fallen to them, Zabihullah Mujahid also pointed out that they wanted to wait outside the city before any transition could take place. But since there was a vacuum and President Ghani left capital Kabul and his entire government melted down, and the security forces abandoned their posts, the green area, they call it the maximum security area, was abandoned by the Afghan National Army. So I think what he wanted to convey was that they had no other option except to walk into capital Kabul to ensure that there was no chaos on capital cities, there was no looting, and there was no gangism over there. So ultimately, I think the one point made very clear by Zabihullah Mujahid that we are in control of Afghanistan, entire country. And with due respect, I don't believe that Taliban are going to give away anything to any ethnic grouping, because we know that first they control the northern part of Afghanistan. All major cities, including Mazar-e-Sharif, fell to Taliban. And probably President Ghani, who visited Mazar-e-Sharif with the hope that Rashid Dostum and other Northern Alliance commanders would be able to provide him kind of a support which wasn't there. But within 3 days, he visited Mazar-e-Sharif on Wednesday, and Mazar-e-Sharif fell on Saturday. So I think that was the kind of probably the final message from the Afghan people and the Afghan northern areas, that entire population, because they were so fed up with the corruption, they were so fed up with the misgovernance, that they didn't listen to the warlords and the military commanders, which used to had a lot of respect from the people in northern parts of the country. Because knowing that Taliban are basically Pashtun, they come from Pashtun-dominated areas. Their birthplace was Kandahar. But on the contrary, they first went to northern parts of the country, and then ironically everybody believed that Commander Ismail Khan is going to put up a stiff resistance in Herat, but that never happened. Even he was captured. So I think Taliban are in power, in complete control of the country, and the kind of a message which Zabihullah Mujahid conveyed to the global community, that they would like to engage with the world powers and the global community at large.
But there was a Doha agreement also, and there must be some talk. And we are listening to what was being said by Suhail Shaheen, and he was talking about an inclusive government. So if Taliban are going to form the next government and they are not going to include anybody else, so what are they talking about?
Farrukh, inclusive government means, because they know that there are ethnic minorities like Uzbeks and Tajiks and Hazaras as well. There are 3 major communities other than the Pashtun, which, of course, Pashtun is also a big minority, not a majority in Afghanistan. So given the kind of demographic composition we have in Afghanistan, Taliban would like to have on board these 3 major components of Afghan population, because they would like to give a message to the global community that they are entirely reformed, and they believe that they would like to engage with the global community as well as with the domestic demographic composition.
Right.
Because if they don't do that, there's a possibility for us that after some time, maybe after 6 months or 1 year, if they do not, if they're not able to perform that they would like to perform, there could be opposition from the ethnic minorities like
right.
Uzbeks and Hazaras and Tajiks as well.
Right. Brigadier Saab, let me ask you another aspect. The word that is being used is the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, right? Before that, there was a constitution which actually called Afghanistan an Islamic Republic. Is there going to be any substantial change in the contents of the next constitution? Because that has to be written also. And is it going to be some Republican, some democratic model, or it is going to be an emirate where Amir is not elected?
You see, after this ignominious US withdrawal, many were hoping that Taliban surge on Kabul would be in the nature of a atavistic impulse, and they will show barbarity, and nothing of that kind has happened.
Yeah.
So the emirate thing that we are listening, and in many statements Taliban representatives have also stated about that, that would only be clearer once an interim government comes into place and we know more about their political ideology.
Right.
They might have changed in many other ways, but their basic political ideology is predicated upon the same Islamic Sharia concept.
Right.
So I reckon that they might not change a lot on that, but there is, I see a little daylight where they could be a little more accommodative to have a kind of a government which has a more pluralistic tinge in the greater republican tradition of Afghans, because you know Afghans traditionally have always been amenable to a center which allows republican tribal hold into their respective areas. It has been there since the time of Amir Abdur Rahman, and I think this time around, with some flavor of Sharia, if they can come up to a constitutional arrangement based upon a loya jirga in which all the ethnicities are accommodated, so that would be pluralistic.
Right.
And
what will be the dynamic of this selecting this interim government? And once it comes to power, how long will it stay in power?
Well, the interim government can only come into being at this point of time when Taliban are in complete control through an accommodative process in which they co-opt all other ethnicities. They create a structure. Obviously, the main portfolios will go to Taliban, being the major protagonists in this power equation. But some shareholding would be there for the other ethnicities like Tajiks, Uzbeks, Hazaras. And if that happens, then the next step would be to go for an arrangement and a process in which they go for co-opting the national opinion to come at a constitutional scheme of power sharing as to what kind of future constitutional, what sustainable governance system Afghanistan is going to, whether it be a federal, presidential, republican.
So we don't know at this moment what exactly is going to
happen.
happen.
It's a bit premature to comment.
Javed Jadoon Saab, you want to come in, you want to comment on the same question regarding the nature of next emirate. Is it going to be republican, constitutional, and democratic? Or it is going to be something different?
If you look at one of the comments, made by Zabiullah Mujahid, he told the global community that we have a right to form the type of a government we would like to. He quoted examples that there are different systems prevailing around the world. He quoted the type of governments in the Middle East and in the Western world. He said we have every right to form a government of our own choice, and he very categorically stated that Islamic system is their guiding principle, and they would like to adhere to the Islamic system in Afghanistan, and nobody should have any problem with that.
Right.
So far, we engage with the global community. We don't create. One more thing he added, that we are going to live within the bounds of our own country, within the frontiers of our own country. We can introduce any kind of a system which is acceptable to the people of Afghanistan.
I get that. The humble submission is Taliban being one of the major internationally visible clerical movement, right? They are clerics. One would expect that what they interpret might be generally applied or adopted by many other places as well. And there is an issue of religious ijtihad or religious interpretation that kind of stopped 1,000 years ago. So political system and its nature, whatever experiment they are going to come up with, might actually be a movement. And that's why one was asking, is there a possibility that it might be some kind of democratic process?
I think definitely, Farrukh, because in this globalized world, you really can't survive in isolation. You have to engage with the global community. And he talked about reconstruction and rebuilding of the nation. And without the financial assistance of the global community, you really can't do that, because you need money, you need technical assistance, you need assistance in governance as well. I think much is happening behind the scenes as well. We know that there was a meeting between the CENTCOM chief and the top Taliban leadership in Doha, and I think that is a kind of a sign that they are still engaging with the Americans, and they would like to have a stable government where Americans are not going to oppose them the way that the rest of the important world capitals start opposing them as well. Because once Americans give a green signal to a kind of a government in Kabul, I think the rest of the countries in the West, including the European Union and Britain, would like to be on board with the Americans. And because I think Americans believe that was indicative as far as President Biden's statements are concerned, that he has no regrets as far as the stance he has taken, and he was talking about the withdrawal and its ramifications. Though there was definitely certain miscalculations on part of the intel community in the USA, the Pentagon, their military leadership, and the political leadership in the State Department as well. Having said that, despite the fact that they believe that their all calculations about the fall of the major cities and capital Kabul weren't according to their predictions. But I think Americans would like to engage with the Taliban. They would like to have a kind of a government in Kabul which is not going to provide any space to the terrorist groups there, like the ISIS and
that was stated. That was stated as well. Allow me to come back to Brigadier Saab. Brigadier Saab, one aspect that is quite interesting. Ashraf Ghani left. Many of his acolytes left and apparently resigned or quit the system also. But one man is creating a lot of noise. That is Amatullah Saleh. And I will take you back not to 1996, but immediately after that, until 2001, there was a de facto government that was Taliban that was controlling most of the country, right? From 85% to then 97%. On the other side was this Panjshiri group, which was based there, and they had de facto de jure title, and they kept on fighting, and eventually after 9/11 they started increasing their territory, and we got the former government. The question right now is, are we going to go into a repeat of that? Because Amatullah Saleh claims that he is the legitimate survivor of the previous government, and as per the old constitution, if president resigns, the senior vice president becomes the president.
You see, and where is Saleh?
It was said that he is sitting somewhere around
Panjshir Valley, trying to stoke up unrest and a resistance. But I doubt very much because all the crossing points are with the Taliban. His position is quite untenable.
Plus Doha. Doha also.
Yes, and there is a de facto control of Taliban. Under these conditions, his chances of stoking unrest are rather slim. So I don't give much credence to those news that is going to be a major
because Indian media keeps on playing with it.
Yeah, but I think it's far cry.
Right.
what we need to do at this point is that we need to look at the whole scenario from a humanitarian angle also. As of now, there is no semblance of an organized governance in Kabul, and we should be concerned about that as a neighboring country. On Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a lot more to be done, more than establishment of an interim government. For instance, where is the bank? Where is the currency? There was news about Afghanistan's state bank having bolted to United States, and his, the assets have been freezed, around 9.4 billion.
Yeah, his tweets were also visible, where he is telling how he was betrayed by Ashraf Ghani and everything. Yeah,
he was saying that he was trying to stabilize
currency. We hear that there is another man who has been approached, and he might actually take over.
What I'm pointing out is that at this point of time, there are municipal functions.
Municipal money also, currency is important.
There is a policing function. All those semblance of a civic order has to be created, and in that, until and unless that happens, a humanitarian problem might surface. And there comes the role of the regional countries. I subscribe to this view of my worthy member, participant, that United States is playing a very important role and would like to have a stable Afghanistan. But more than that is the role of the regional countries at this point of time. I think Pakistan, when it comes to recognition of Taliban, when and if they form the government, should be contingent upon regional consensus. We should not cast a lone furrow, because it would be played against Pakistan by forces inimical to it. And now is the time that countries like Iran, China, Russia, Pakistan should take the center stage, and I'm glad I heard that our foreign minister is planning a visit
to other countries as well, regional countries. That is important. One aspect is that these two countries, especially these great powers, China and Russia, have not closed their missions in Kabul. So far, it is how reported, Javed Jadoon Saab. On the other side, India, which was earlier saying that they are going to stay open there, they pulled their staff today. The question at this moment is, whatever the government, what will be the process of that government's seeking international legitimacy? Is it going to be through UNSC? Is it going to be through some other process? Or if the US actually recognizes them, they will become the legitimate government?
I think that is an extremely important question, because now what is steering the Taliban leadership is that how they can have the legitimacy after they form a government, whether it is inclusive or not. Once they form a government in Kabul, I think their next most important step would be to seek recognition from important international players like USA, like Russia, China. Pakistan, of course, is a neighbor. But in my personal opinion, Farrukh, I believe that regional countries should leave alone Afghanistan, because they have suffered so much because of the foreign interventions, that it is about time that every major important regional player should think about it, that let the Afghans decide whatever they want to decide for themselves. Because Taliban are a very, very mature movement. They have gone through a hell. In the last 20 years, they suffered a lot. They offered so much, so many sacrifices that it is unprecedented. Even the Afghan civilians offered unprecedented sacrifices. After fighting the only superpower and the rest of the NATO and the allied forces, they have finally been able to achieve what they wanted to achieve, to push the foreign troops out of Afghanistan. I think it is about time that even China, Russia, or any other regional country should not interfere in the government formation, because it would give a very misleading notion to the rest of the global community that maybe there's a government which has been sponsored by any particular country or group of countries. So after they form a government, of course, I think regional countries, along with the major foreign capitals, should engage with Taliban.
On one side, the question primarily, as you addressed earlier, was about legitimacy, right? Who recognizes or who doesn't? If you don't recognize a government, it is not in your people's mind not legitimate, right? That is one aspect, and we are going to actually hammer on and ask about that as well. But regarding the engagement of regional players, if you actually let Afghanistan be, what will you do of the Doha agreement or the process? That was also some kind of interaction and role played by all major powers, especially in the region, the Troika Plus.
Farrukh, there was only a pledge on part of the Taliban. There was no written agreement that what kind of an inclusive government they would like to have in Kabul. They pledged with the Americans, and you rightly pointed out the Doha process. But what I was talking about was to let the Afghans decide what kind of a government they would like to have.
Yeah.
Once there's a government in place, of course Taliban would like to have the engagement with the global community, and recognition is the most important aspect once they take over in Kabul.
Right.
Recognition, I think Pakistan should be, in my opinion, the first country to recognize the Taliban government. They do not have any opposition anywhere in the entire country. And even some of the important leaders like Abdullah, he has been soft in his statement when he said that, well, we can talk with them, we can have an arrangement which could work out in Kabul. I think that is the kind of flexibility which Abdullah has shown towards Taliban. That means there must be some backdoor channels opened between Abdullah and Taliban. And even Hamid Karzai, who is the former president of Afghanistan.
Yeah, backdoor was one thing, Doha itself actually.
And you, at the outset, you pointed out there's a delegation in Pakistan as well. And there are some very important leaders part of the delegation. And I think when they go back, the most important task in front of this delegation and the leadership in the northern part of the country, including Uzbeks and Tajiks and Hazaras, they would like to have some part in the government. But that is going to be, should be left to the Taliban to decide how much and what kind of participation they would like to have on part of the
Afghan people perhaps, but I'm told that before we proceed, our team has prepared a report for you. Let us first watch that, and then we are going to resume discussion.
According to a statement issued by the Prime Minister's office after the discussion on the security situation in Afghanistan, Pakistan will continue to work with the international community and all Afghan stakeholders to facilitate an inclusive political settlement in the country. The Prime Minister Imran Khan, while chairing the National Security Council meeting, has directed all possible facilities be made available to repatriate Pakistanis, diplomats, journalists and staff of international organizations seeking to leave Afghanistan. It is now time for the international community to work together to ensure an inclusive political settlement for long-term peace, security and development of Afghanistan and the region. United Nations Security Council meeting on Afghanistan was held on Monday at the UN headquarters after the Taliban entered Kabul and President Ashraf Ghani left Afghanistan as the group took over the country 20 years after they were overthrown by a US-led invasion. The United Nations Security Council is calling for talks to create a new government in Afghanistan and an end to fighting and abuse after UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned of chilling Taliban curbs on human rights and mounting violations against women and girls. The Security Council stressed the importance of combating terrorism in Afghanistan to ensure other countries were not threatened or attacked. Striking a defiant tone, President Joe Biden said that he stands squarely behind his decision to withdraw US forces from Afghanistan. He did not admit any US fault in how the drawdown was executed and that the Afghan government's collapse was quicker than anticipated. Biden said he was faced with a choice between sticking to a previously negotiated agreement to withdraw US troops this year or sending thousands more service members back in Afghanistan for a third decade of war. Biden expressed confidence in his decision to proceed with the withdrawal and said he was prepared to take the heat. He said that the US will continue to support the Afghan people, push for regional diplomacy and speak out for the rights of Afghans.
Right, Brigadier Janjua, you have seen the report as well. But earlier, Jadun Sahab was saying that Doha process ended in a pledge. Was there only a pledge, or was there a document signed in which they actually bound themselves into doing certain things? The Afghan Taliban.
Of course, there was a document.
Okay.
There was
how much of
which
it?
We are not privy.
How much of it is in public domain?
What we know is the first part, that's in public domain, in which both sides had to hold their end of the bargain. Taliban ceasefire, United States freeing of prisoners, delisting from UN sanctions. There's a classified part, that is Annex A, which we are not privy to. But let me tell you, events have overtaken Doha process, and now Doha process per se is actually formation of this interim inclusive government. There's no difference between the two processes.
Right.
And then I'll agree with Jadoon Saab once he says that we should leave Afghans to their own devices to decide about their future. There's no denying that. But where we cannot remain splendidly isolated is the process that is going on, that is unfolding, the humanitarian crisis. What Pakistan needs to do at this point of time is to open our, crossing points and channels for humanitarian aid, healthcare, their, food stuff, medicines, and all those crossing points should be, we should be in a facilitative mode. And second, we should also, without being too open about it, we should have some kind of advisory, function also, wherein we can render help, because Taliban, they have so much on their, plate at this moment that they definitely need. There should be a strategic advisory group on governance, advisory group. There should be a diplomatic advisory group. In our embassy in Kabul, augmenting that. It should, there are so many things that need to be advised on our part. For instance, we know that the world is viewing Taliban from a different angle. EU and United States, their terrorism and other issues have their own, problems. And in order to, help Taliban chart a right course, I think, for instance, UN Security Council committee on sanctions, they might be advised to help it come to.
I'm just told that Tariq Farhadi, who's a senior analyst from Afghanistan, joins us on Skype. Tariq Saab, thank you very much for being part of the program. Now that the Afghan Taliban have almost taken over the entire country, what exactly do you think is going to happen in coming days? We saw Zabiullah Mujahid's statements, but what is your understanding how things are going to unfold, sir?
Greetings, sir. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because the arrival of Taliban in Kabul did not cause any bloodshed. Afghanistan has suffered from civil war. This could have been much uglier. And that in fact Ashraf Ghani is a fugitive president. He stole money, he stole the opportunity from Afghanistan, a good opportunity that was presented to Afghanistan with so much international aid, and he drove it to the ground finally. But the Taliban have come in. They come in, they are now in the presidential palace, they give press conference and they are saying the right things. What I would like is for the Taliban leaders now to be in Afghanistan and not Doha. There is a international legal void right now because the former president is a fugitive and the current government is not recognized by the international community, and that's just not a good situation to be in. The leaders also need to leave Doha and come inside Afghanistan. It looks like the population at large has accepted this state of affairs. Nobody has risen against the Taliban. And if we walk with attention on the eggs, we are able to save some sort of peace. Even the leaders, Karzai, Abdullah and Hekmatyar, have said yesterday that they would like to help the Taliban without expecting any positions of power. So this is very good. The Taliban can form their government. If they wish, they can call on other elements in Afghanistan to help them, support them, even in technical capacities. But we need to have a government anytime soon, because Afghanistan is now without a government, without a leader, and without a representation at the United Nations.
Right. That is a very good point, sir. I'm glad that you joined us, although it was at the very end of the program. Thank you very much, Tariq Patadi sir, for your valuable views. Let me very quickly come back to Javed Jadoon sir. Javed Jadoon sir, Brigadier sir was saying that events have actually taken over. Overtaken actually the Doha process. But don't you think that these events are actually a logical succession of events that followed from Doha process?
I think, Farrukh, there are two important things. They have overtaken everything, Taliban. The lightning speed they captured every major city was not expected by any observer, whether military or political. They have done that. Within 7 days or more than 7 days, they captured the entire country. Now they are the de facto government in Kabul. Though there is still time, I think they are not in haste. They would like to have an inclusive government. They would like to keep everybody on board, including Hamid Karzai and other important figures. But I think we mustn't doubt their intentions. What they're doing is unprecedented. For the first time, they have shown the world that they are tolerant, they have changed, and they would like to engage the global community. They would like to give rights to the women and right to education to the women as well. And even they talked about freedom of expression in media. I think this is important. So let us wait for a couple of days. I believe that there's going to be a government in Kabul, a stable government, and global community will recognize them.
Right. On that note, I'm told that we have to conclude the program. Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Jadua sir, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time. Javed Jadoon sir, thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Let me repeat once again, thank Tariq Patadi sir also, who actually joined us earlier. Because you have listened to our participants, I really don't have that much to add here. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.